Thanks, Don. Well, it was a few years ago. My wife and I were making dinner in the kitchen, and we received a phone call from our middle son. Now, if you know our middle son at all, you will know this was actually a momentous event that we received a phone call from him. So I picked up the phone. I'm like, "Hey, Zach, how's it going?" He was down in Vancouver at the time. He's back down there again, attending Capilano University. And he said, "Hey, I'm doing okay. My car just stopped." I said, "Okay, well, like, where are you? Are you safe? Like, where are you at?" He's like, "Well, I'm on the freeway." Turns out he was in the passing lane on the freeway when his car suddenly died on him. He had a good sense of humor about it. Down the road, he said eventually, I was the dot on Google Maps where, there was a stoppage on the road, which is pretty cool. I don't know, do you want to pop up my first slide there, buddy? There you go. That's about where he was stopped and what was happening at the time. Fortunately for him, it was rush hour, and that meant it was basically a crawl anyways on the freeway, so it wasn't the biggest thing. But what happened was actually really amazing. Tara and I, kind of go into parent mode at that point, which means we're both praying for him and also trying to help troubleshoot this with him, right? Problem solve what he's going to do. And what was amazing was, shortly after he stopped and was on the phone with us, there was a car that pulled up behind him and stopped. Out of the car got this woman who was an off-duty police officer. And she started talking Zach through this. She actually called a tow truck along the way while they were stopped there, and she was helping to sort out what was going to happen and waiting with them for a bit. I guess someone saw two cars stopped and thought there was an accident. So someone must have called 911, because shortly after that, an ambulance came, which was really helpful because the ambulance attendants helped get his car off to the shoulder of the road, which was really good. At that point, the police officer left because she had to get going, and then a little while later, a fire truck stopped to check on Zach to make sure he was okay. After the fire truck had also left, a little while later, a highway maintenance truck came and stopped just to make sure he was okay. And we're looking at this going, wow, God really showed up in a cool way, watching out for our kid. That's pretty amazing. But this is the thing, I would say in that moment, there were so many everyday heroes who showed up to actually take care of our kid in a moment when he could have, it was rush hour, he was probably fine, but he could have been in some danger there. You never know what kind of idiot's flying up the HOV lane who suddenly makes a lane change, and who knows what happens on that road. So we were really grateful for these people who went out of their way to make sure our kid was okay in that moment. This fall, we are walking through a journey to freedom, following the events of the historical exodus of God's people from slavery in Egypt and into the promised land where God was taking them. And the reason we're looking at the story of the Exodus is because this is a story really that gets replayed throughout history. We looked at it last week, that there's a pattern within the Exodus story where we see God bringing people on the way out of the struggles and the challenge and the slavery that we're in. He brings us through, on the way through the wilderness, ultimately on the way into the promised land that he has prepared for us. And today, what we're going to see is that God went ahead and prepared the way for the Exodus to happen through some really ordinary people who also became everyday heroes. Now, I'm defining today everyday heroes as ordinary people whose views align with God and who act in line with God's character, even though they may never become well-known or famous. People who let their thoughts and their actions conform to the way God thinks about and acts in our world. So let's explore the actions of these everyday heroes and see how we also are invited, really, to put on a cape. Not literally. Capes are dangerous, right? You never know what can happen. No capes. All right. So, just a quick recap from last week of what we did. Last week in Exodus 1, we saw Pharaoh attempt to subdue the Israelites, which is really in rebellion against God's command to, be fruitful, multiply, fill the whole earth, and subdue the earth. Pharaoh was trying to subdue a people. And that's contrary to God's instructions. So he was using a few different strategies to try and subdue and control the Israelite people who were in his nation. He tried first harsh labor, working them ruthlessly. Then that didn't work out so well, so he started killing the boys at delivery, or at least he tried that. That didn't work out so well either. And then came up with a strategy to say, any boy that's born to the Israelites or the Hebrews, take them and throw them into the Nile River so they'll drown. Now, we saw God in chapter 1 already overcome the first two strategies of Pharaoh. When he worked them ruthlessly, the Israelites, we were told, continued to multiply and spread throughout the whole land. When he told the midwives to kill the Israelite babies at delivery, the males at delivery, they said, actually, the Israelite women are too vigorous. They get those babies out before we even show up. We can't kill them at delivery. Didn't work out. And again, we read that God multiplied the Israelites and they spread through the land. Now, here in chapter 2, as we dive into the first 10 verses of that today, we're going to see God overcome the third strategy of Pharaoh in a pretty dynamic way. Now, I want you to remember from chapter 1, Pharaoh's order to the people. So Pharaoh gave this order to all his people, not just the Israelites now, every person in Egypt. Every Hebrew boy that is born, you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Hold on to that for just a little while. Because as we dig into this, we're going to see how God overcomes Pharaoh yet again and continues to prepare his people for their way out of Egypt. So let's read chapter 2, verses 1 to 10 of Exodus. If you have a Bible here today, feel free to open it up. If you don't know where it is, second book of the Bible is Exodus, and chapter 2 is the big number 2. You can grab a Bible from the chairs in front of you, or just follow along on the screen. So it says, now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. That's pretty great. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. Now this here, as much as it is the birth story of Moses, which is probably what the title in your Bible says, this is actually also the story of 2 daughters. 3 really, but 2 primarily who are named as daughters in this story. Not given their name, but noted as a daughter. First, we have the daughter of Levi. A daughter of Levi who marries this Levite man, and they have a baby together. And then we also have the daughter of Pharaoh himself. And unintentionally, these 2 women both work together to undermine Pharaoh's policies, which is just awesome. So first of all, let's talk about the daughter of Levi, Moses' birth mom. She is named elsewhere in the Bible, not in this particular text, but I think we actually see this as the daughter of Levi here to make the connection between her and the daughter of Pharaoh. And with the daughter of Levi, first of all, she sees that her baby is good, that he is a fine child. Now, okay, let's be honest. All moms, right, look at their kid and go, wow, they're fantastic. They're so good, right? They're a fine child. Their baby is the greatest thing ever. Okay, but there's something actually else going on in this text. Maybe not all moms are feeling that way. I'm just kidding, totally kidding. But there's an echo here in this phrase of something so much more significant. See, what Pharaoh has said is worthy of death. These Hebrew male babies should just be thrown into the river. They're worth nothing. They have no value. They should just be thrown away and destroyed. But the daughter of Levi looks at this young baby boy and sees that he is good. Now, interestingly, the construction of the sentence is the same as the construction of the sentences in the book of Genesis, chapter 1. When God creates all things and he starts looking at things he has made and says it was good. As God has said his creation is good, so too this daughter of Levi looks at her son and says he is good. Pharaoh has said this baby has no value, he should just be thrown away, whereas this woman looks at him and says, I actually agree with God that he is good. Now, as I thought about this week, I was thinking how much this challenges how we think about people in society today. Some people, we tend to not think that they have much value at all. Maybe people who don't agree with our particular perspective, political or otherwise. Admittedly, for me, I was struggling a little bit this week about how I think about those who camp out nearby the church. I've been a little bit frustrated with the inconvenience of every day coming and having to clean up more stuff. Just about every day, there's something left behind. And it's easy for me to start getting to a place of thinking of those who are struggling in that way as less than. But this, to me, challenged me to think about, how does God see them? How does God see the other people in my world that I might look at for whatever reason and look down on because they're not worth my respect? You know, beyond, I recognize that, you know what, we all have our own sinful choices, and some of those sinful choices make it really, really difficult with some people, right? To get along with them or to see the value in them. But God still looks at his creation and says it is good. It's broken. It's broken, which is why he sent Jesus to actually fix the problem of our sin. But it's still good. And am I willing to conform my perspective to God's perspective? Or is my perspective a little more like Pharaoh's? That some people have value and some people don't. Well, because of her conviction, this daughter of Levi put together a papyrus basket to put her son into. Now, there's a couple of interesting things in this text I want to draw out today. This is one of them. The word that's used for the papyrus basket is actually the word ark. Now, if you're a bit of a Bible student, you'll know that the ark shows up earlier in the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 6, when Noah builds an ark. And he covered the ark with tar and pitch, just as the daughter of Levi does. And just like in Genesis chapter 6, where the ark became a vessel of deliverance for Noah and his family and a whole bunch of animals on the earth, so too here, this little ark becomes a vessel of deliverance for the son of this daughter of Levi. She was protecting the life of her son as best as she could, while still sort of actually following the command of Pharaoh to throw him in the Nile. Still put him in the river, just made sure he wasn't going to drown right away. So that's the daughter of Levi, a woman who conformed her thinking with the thinking of God and how she viewed her son. And then that actually impacted her actions of what she did for him. Now, the second daughter is the daughter of Pharaoh. And the daughter of Pharaoh sees the ark. One of the things you should notice in this text is how often seeing gets kind of highlighted in this, right? The daughter of Levi sees that her son is good. The daughter of Pharaoh sees the ark. She sends a servant to bring the ark back. She opens it up, and she sees the baby and has compassion on him. Which incidentally, I mean, she recognizes this is a Hebrew baby. This is one of the ones who was supposed to be thrown in the river to be killed. But she looks at this little baby and she has compassion on him, which is consistent with how God sees his oppressed people, which we're going to get to at the end of this chapter. Pharaoh's daughter, even though she's a daughter of the Pharaoh who has been ordering the execution of these babies, she actually has a heart posture that's aligned with the heart of God. There's a question to be asked here. Why was she actually out there in the first place? We read that she was out there to bathe. At this point in Egyptian history, they probably actually had indoor plumbing. She had the ability to bathe indoors, so why was she actually out there? Is it possible she was looking for an opportunity to rescue a Hebrew baby? Text doesn't tell us, but it's one of those interesting moments. But there's actually more here There's a couple little hyperlinks in here that suggest the daughter of Pharaoh ended up acting in alignment with God's plans. When she discovered the ark with the baby, Moses' sister, who we think was probably Miriam, who'd be about 6 years older than Moses, shows up because she's been watching, right, to see what would happen with the baby. And when she sees that Pharaoh's daughter has found the baby and opened up the ark, she says, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Asking permission to leave the shore of the Nile to go and get someone to nurse the baby. But did you notice her question? Shall I go? That's foreshadowing of Moses coming back to Pharaoh down the road to ask, shall we go out into the wilderness so that we can worship our God? Now, the difference, of course, is, and little spoiler alert coming, well, the daughter of Pharaoh says yes to this request. Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse this baby? Pharaoh is going to say with a resounding no to Moses to the same question. Can we go out to the wilderness? Not a chance. But Pharaoh's daughter tells Moses' sister, go. Get one of the women, and she ends up even paying her to take care of this baby. So while Pharaoh is looking for ways to subdue and control the Israelites, his daughter, that's just awesome, is acting more in line with God's desires than with Pharaoh's. She's not listening to her dad so well, but she is acting with the heart of God. Even in Pharaoh's own household, his plans are being undermined. Now, one of the things that we hopefully picked up as we've been reading this today and what we read last week in the narrative is that all through this early part of the Exodus narrative, all the preparation, there is an incredible striking irony, right? That we see women playing such a prominent role as the agents of God. Back to chapter 1, verse 22. Remember? What did we read? Oh, there we go. I missed a bunch of slides for you. There we go. Pharaoh gave this order to all his people, every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. What an idiot. In his attempts to subdue the Israelites, he's been attempting to kill those he perceived as a threat, the Israelite males. But all of his plans so far have been undermined by the women, those that he intentionally let live. The midwives, the daughter of Levi, his own daughter, have undermined his plans. And these women, who have been faithful to the heart of God, became everyday heroes who are forever commemorated in this story of the Exodus. Now, I just want to skip to the end of the chapter here in a moment and kind of just pick up one more thing today as we read this story. So 40 years go by really quickly in chapter 2 between verses 10 and 11. And Moses is going to go through some things, right? We've read about his birth, but he's going to go through a few things that isn't all going to go well. We're going to cover that next week as part of unpacking his story and how God called him. But then we read this comment at the end of chapter 2, verses 23 to 25. During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Also, compassionate viewing of his people. So the Israelites cry out to God in their trouble. But what they're going to find is that long before they ever cried out, remember this is 40 years later, right? Long before they ever cried out to God, God was already at work on their behalf. God had been causing them to grow and multiply in spite of Pharaoh's plans. God had been working through everyday heroes to ensure that they would continue to thrive. And as we see hints of in chapter 2, God was already raising up someone who would come and deliver them from their oppression. Interestingly, one of the meanings of Moses, there's actually a couple meanings of the name, but one of the meanings of the name Moses means one who draws out, which is why we read at the end of that section with Pharaoh's daughter, she called him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water, right? One who draws out is Moses' name, which has a double meaning, of course. First of all, that he was drawn out of the water by the daughter of Pharaoh, but also that he would ultimately draw God's people out of Egypt and deliver them. But as you think about what God was doing here in the midst of their struggle and before they ever thought to cry out to God for help, you know, for us, when we get to the point of crying out to God, it isn't actually the first that he's heard about it. We may find out that he's gone long before us to prepare the way, often through people who seemed unremarkable at the time, but maybe turned out to be everyday heroes in our story as well. So, as we wrap it up today, I just want to consider a few things about what does it mean to be an everyday hero. Because I think there's sort of a twofold kind of thing going on here. Number one is that God uses everyday heroes in our story before we ever realize he's doing something. But then he also calls us to live as everyday heroes in the story that he's working out for the whole world and for others around us. So what does it mean to actually step into this and be an everyday hero? What does that look like? Well, can I first say it doesn't look spectacular. It might look downright mundane. It may not be noteworthy to the culture that we find ourselves in. We may never get our names in the paper, or be a significant social media influencer, or be nearly as famous as most of the athletes of most sports around us, or actors or politicians, or the people who are famous simply for being famous. We may never be as famous as them. But as Ian likes to point out, we get to have our picture on God's fridge door. So that's pretty great. Society may not see the significance or importance of what we do, but God does. He does see. So that's the first thing. Being an everyday hero doesn't necessarily look spectacular. Doesn't look noteworthy. But what it does mean is being faithful to God. Seeing things as he does. Having a heart for the things and the people that he does. Which means choosing to form our thinking in a way that's consistent with the thinking of God. Aligning our values with his, our thinking about what is good with what